This is MTK on the MIC for Elections Hotwired on The World's Got Problems at Fresh Jive. And though Bush-Cheney will be out, there may be a black Secretary of State named Dr. Rice in the White House next year. No, not Condoleezza, nor is she even related to the sitting Secretary of State. She's Dr. Susan Rice, and she is one of the formidables newly announced as Obama's National Security Policy Working Group. Few surprises here. Longtime Obama advisors Sam Nunn and Greg Craig joined Dr. Susan Rice, a former Assistant Secretary of State, think tank academic, and Obama confidant, who is joined by a mix-up of Clinton-era policymakers. Former Secretary of State Warren Christopher, Secretary of Defense William Perry, and National Security Advisors Dr. Tony Lake and Jim Steinberg. And the group includes Madeleine Albright, who, it must be reported, was actually against George W. Bush's Iraq War in 2003. So she feels it was better to starve them to death than to murder them in public view. And Obama's National Security Working Group includes two 9/11 Commission members, the chair, Lee Hamilton, and Representative Tim Romer. Notably absent from this list is the humanist writer Samantha Power, who was an Obama policy advisor as recently as February when she fell victim to the interminable whisper campaigns of Rove and Fox News and Company. And speaking of whisper campaigns is New York Mayor Mike Bloomberg. Talking to a group of Jewish voters in Boca Raton, Bloomberg told the Jewish Federation of South Palm Beach County, quote, "Many of you know there are plenty of emails floating around the internet targeting Jewish voters and saying that Senator Obama is secretly a Muslim, and a radical one at that. Let's call these rumors what they are. Lies. They are cloaked in concern for Israel, but the real concern is about partisan politics," said Bloomberg, calling it wedge politics at its worst and beckoning Jewish voters to reject it loudly, clearly, and unequivocally. Last week on Hotwired, we reported that polls confirmed there's no gender gap for Barack Obama, and this week we make note of Josh Gerstein's piece in the New York Sun that downplays a race gap as well. Gerstein writes that mainstream media's attempt to paint Obama as a liability with white men on the basis of race is unjustified. It's true that Obama falls behind McCain by 20 points among white men in the latest NBC Wall Street Journal poll, but Gerstein points out that the gap is actually less than what one would expect based on recent history. Exit polls in 2004 had Senator Kerry trailing Bush by 25 points among white men, and in 2000, Vice President Gore trailed Bush by 24 points. If Ross Perot had not been in the race, the gap between President Clinton and Bob Dole among white men would have been closer to 20 points. So Obama's par for the course for a Democratic nominee, black or white. The New York Times makes note of Obama's strong corporate ethanol ties from his corn-producing home state of Illinois, all in the wide open, and all without a single word about emissions. And there were two great pieces in last week's New Yorker. A look at Keith Olbermann's rise from snappy-witted sportscaster to irreverent but earnest anti-Bush voice of the people, and a lengthy feature on Hugo Chavez that provides an incredible insider's look at Colombia-FARC hostage negotiations between Chavez and Presidents Uribe of Colombia, Correa of Ecuador, and Kirchner of Argentina, and an able Colombian senator, Piedad Córdoba. The author of the piece, John Lee Anderson, was a fly on the wall during talks in the Dominican Republic. That piece ends with a discussion of New Mexico's Bill Richardson's Spanish-language hours-long visit with Chavez in April of this year, a pointed comment on what the Democrats would bring diplomatically to the hemisphere after years of Bush-Cheney frost that McCain supports firmly. This is MTK on the MIC.